Believe it or not, the Sega Dreamcast turns 25 years old in North America soon. That's hard to fathom that it has already been a quarter of a century since Sega released console hardware. But for this episode, I don't want to talk about why the Dreamcast failed or any of the reasons why Sega was doomed as a hardware maker. For this one, I just want to celebrate a bunch of games I still play for the Dreamcast. A group that has an excellent pick up and play value that remains sky high all these years later. They don't need 20 hours of time investment to get anywhere either. If you're looking for something to play to commemorate 25 years of Sega's incredible 6th generation console, this is a great place to start. Callisto developed the Midway-published Four-Wheel Thunder in 2000. This off-road racer has 24 tracks, split-screen multiplayer, and plenty of arcade-style boosting to keep you busy. There's also a championship mode that allows you to upgrade your ride and compete better. The two-player bomb races are a hoot, basically latching an explosive to your vehicle that you can transfer to another player. This one gets a ton of flack because of the difficulty, and it deserves it. It's really difficult to compete in the single player, and you'll be fighting just to break the top 10 far too often. Don't take it too seriously, focus on the multiplayer and practice modes, and it still can be a fun time. Not the best racer on the Dreamcast, but I love the track design and the arcade-focused mechanics. Capcom vs. SNK 2 was originally released in the arcade in 2001, and a perfect Dreamcast version landed almost immediately after. The first one was good, and this one was just as incredible. You have the expected fighters from the big Capcom and SNK franchises, but you also get throwbacks like Eagle from the original Street Fighter, Athena from Psycho Soldier, and Maki from Final Fight 2. The 3D backgrounds are stunning, and the new ratio system works better than the original by allowing more flexibility in your fighter choices. There are other ways to play this thanks to ports to a few other consoles, but the Dreamcast does it so well, I always come back to this one. Unfortunately, it was a Japanese-only release on the Dreamcast back then, so there are some barriers to enjoying the original Dreamcast experience. The replay value is so high, however, I find this to be of little concern. Dead or Alive 2 was another Naomi-developed arcade release that came home to the Dreamcast perfect. This one was done by Tecmo and is the sequel to the Model 2 original. The story is utter nonsense, but everything else is a grade A must-play experience. The graphics, the sound, the gameplay, it all screams a quality that was really something at the time. I remember hooking my Dreamcast up to my PC monitor with a VGA box, and just being utterly blown away by the presentation. It put most PC games to shame. The PS2 version showed up afterwards with more content and changes, but I never felt it looked anywhere near as good as this one, so this is the one I prefer. The 4-player tag matches are an absolute must for fighting game fans.
Ready? On!
I love competitive sports games, especially the ones that are easy to pick up and play. ESPN International Track and Field by Konami was one such game. This was a bunch of Summer Games events like the 100-meter dash, javelin throw, weightlifting, and hurdles. It's got 4-player support, motion captured animations, and the classic ESPN presentation. The gameplay is at first so simple you may think it's shallow, but this is a game where seconds count, so every choice, every second you're off, makes a huge difference. Get a few friends together, and it's damn near the perfect party game.
The distance of the second attempt was 8.00 meters. The height cleared at the first attempt was 4.50 meters.
Wrestling games on the Dreamcast were really disappointing for me until I played Fire Pro Wrestling D. This was originally a Japanese exclusive, but it has an English translation now that breaks down those barriers. The 4-player action is deep, customizable, and easily one of the best wrestling experiences on this console. Don't worry if you don't follow Japanese wrestling promotions, because there are a ton of American icons here as well. The gameplay takes a bit of trial and error to get a feel for, but once you do, many different match types will have you coming back again and again. In many ways, it feels like a 2D version of the Nintendo 64 wrestling titles. The visual style and overall presentation hold up well to me, but don't let that turn you away if you don't dig the two-dimensional art. It's got it where it counts in the deep and varied gameplay. In 2000, Arc System Works and Sammy dropped Guilty Gear X, a Naomi arcade port to the Dreamcast. This was such a step forward for two-dimensional fighting game visuals at the time. The high-res art was smooth and beautiful, supporting a full 640 by 480 and VGA box compatibility. It wasn't just a pretty face because the gameplay and music were bangers as well, easily holding its own against the better Capcom offerings. I would have liked to have seen a 2-on-2 tag option, but otherwise, this is still a standout. The easy to pick up gameplay fills the screen with flashy moves that still make it a regular play for me today. There are other versions of this and sequels since, but it just feels so at home on the Dreamcast. Get a good controller, and I'm sure you'll feel the exact same. The House of the Dead 2 was really the first game that hammered home what we were getting with the Dreamcast back in 1999. The Naomi-based arcade original showed up, and then later that year a perfect port was at home. It was a dream come true, and a huge part of what made the Dreamcast so special. Whereas the Saturn port of the first game had to be compromised heavily, this one was the exact opposite. It was the arcade version and more, complete with an original mode that lets you use hidden items you acquire in the game. There's branching paths, 2-player support, and a training mode to help newbies get started. You can play it elsewhere today, but the Dreamcast is where this belongs and has always felt the best.
No! Help! Help!
Midway's Hydro Thunder was a special arcade release in 1999. That explosive speed, the massive jumps, and the crazy courses really made it a standout for me and my friends. When a Dreamcast port showed up later that year, it hit right at the console's launch, essentially a must-buy for racing fans. It was easily the best-looking version at the time, and the crazy art and settings still hold up now. Blasting around a flooded New York or an erupting volcano never gets old. It's got a 2-player split screen mode, unlockable extras, and frankly, it's a must-play for anyone that loves this console. SNK ported its King of Fighters 98 over to the Dreamcast and called it Dream Match 1999. It wasn't well received at the time by a number of the gaming publications because it was considered old and nothing new, but I really had fun with this one. It added some 3D elements to the backgrounds and a new presentation to an already great playing game. There's 38 fighters, Neo Geo Pocket support to unlock additional content, and it has an arranged soundtrack. Further enhanced ports would come to other machines, but I really dug this Dreamcast edition, and it's still my go-to when I want to play it. Say what you will about the retread, but at the time, I thought this was an excellent port of the timeless King of Fighters 98 experience. NBA Jam was such a fun sports series, and many of its eventual successors were just as awesome. Among those was 2001's NBA Hoops. This took the NBA Jam formula and changed it to a 3-on-3 polygon affair, and I loved every minute of it. It still had the over-the-top animations, you could play with up to 4 players at a time, and it even had mini-games you could play outside of the main contest, like 21. It's a bit slower than the two-dimensional games in some ways, but still every bit as fun. Many of the players resemble their real-world counterparts, and the court and arenas hold up well. Going back and playing the simulation-based NBA games of that era can be tough, because the visuals and presentation don't hold up well, but the arcade style in this one is more than adequate.
Right through the screen! And that guy... Anderson!
This episode is all about pick-up-and-play goodness, and you can't get any better in that regard than 2000's NFL Blitz 2001. This takes the excellent and extremely addictive arcade formula and adds custom features like Create a Team, Create a Player, and Create a Play. There's new mini-games, 4-player support, and a ton of new plays and animations. The fast 7-on-7 action is more akin to arena football than the NFL, but that doesn't matter because it's so damn fun. Every play is extreme, whether it's a good run or a long-distance pass, because the tackle at the end is as vicious as a WWE wrestling move. Games like this never get old as long as a friend or two are with you. The trash talking is guaranteed to go into the wee hours of the morning. In 2000, Capcom released a sequel to their fantastic Power Stone arena-based 3D fighter. Power Stone 2 has the same great setup as before, but expands upon it in some pretty important ways. It now has full 4-player support, more items, more weapons, multi-level stages with new dangers to face, an adventure mode, a shop to buy, sell, and create things until your heart's content. This is one of the great series to come out of the Dreamcast era that for some reason wasn't continued. This was in many ways the evolution of the fighting genre, a fully 3D arena with multiple players. It holds up so well even in 2024 because it still feels so different from the fighting games you normally see played on a two-dimensional plane. You can play it a few different ways, of course, but since this was a Naomi arcade game originally, it's right at home on the old Dreamcast.
Powerful.
Capcom's Project Justice is another fighter I just love to play on the Dreamcast. This is the sequel to Rival Schools United by Fate, and is a tag team fighter that was based on the Naomi arcade original. The 3-on-3 action supports up to 4 players, so again, multiplayer is an outstanding feature, but it's fun no matter how you choose to play it. The wild specials are cool on their own, but really step up a notch when you do the party up team moves, which are basically full on-screen cinematic beatdowns. It's got a wacky story, a large and varied cast of fighters, and it looks incredible. I mean, what's not to like here? It's remained such a staple of my Dreamcast library all these years because it's the only home version I could play. That'll change soon, but it'll always have a place on the list of Dreamcast classics. Sega Rally 2 was a Model 3 based arcade racing game that was ported to the Dreamcast in 1999. This port was less than stellar from a technical viewpoint, but I still play it because it has such a great pick up and play fun factor. The Dreamcast version here has over a dozen courses, weather effects, a bunch of different licensed cars, and a 10-year mode that offers up quite a bit to unlock and sink your teeth into. You can customize your cars, and there's even a split screen mode for 2 players. When you choose which region to play, you might want to skip out on the Japanese original. That version was released first and tends to have the most performance issues. Outside of that little hiccup, however, Sega Rally 2 is still a great time.
Long, medium left. 150, medium right. 50, medium right. 100, caution. Long, medium left. 100, easy left. 100, caution. Left, right. 30, easy left.
Throughout my time with video games, there have been moments of genuine, unforgettable amazement. That happened with 1999 Soul Calibur. This was originally an arcade game done on PlayStation-based hardware, so when the Dreamcast port was released, it had a shiny new coat of visuals that looked so much better. And I don't mean a little upgrade. It went from the blocky, shaky polygons of the PlayStation-based hardware to an ultra-smooth, perfectly running masterpiece on the Dreamcast. On top of that, it also had the most excellent of gameplay, the kind where combos and flashy movements came off effortlessly. Even a novice could feel like a master with Soul Calibur. This hardware couldn't have launched with a better example of what was possible at the time with Sega's new console. There is no better way to play this one than right here on your Sega Dreamcast.
Battle 2, fight! This victory strengthens the soul of Mitsurugi. You win!
I was a big fan of the PlayStation Twisted Metal games, so when Luxo Flux dropped a port of their sequel Vigilante 8 Second Offense on the Dreamcast, I was super stoked. It supports 4-player split screen, has 18 vehicles to choose from, and 8 massive arenas with lots to discover. The Dreamcast version sees the usual graphics upgrades and is still the best way to play it, I feel. I love upgrading my ride and laying the weapons down and blowing the other cars off the course. You can also engage in 2-player co-op and team-based multiplayer. There's a number of great RPG and adventure games on the Dreamcast, but if you want a pure experience of pick up and go adrenaline, Second Offense is a great choice. Like Sega Rally 2, the Virtua Fighter 3 Team Battle port to the Dreamcast wasn't quite arcade perfect, but it's still a great way to play the game. It was ported by Genki and includes all the fighters and stages from the Model 3 arcade original. I still go back to this one because I was such a fan of the series. Even back then I had a hard time finding the arcade in my area, so getting a home version this close was a godsend. For the most part, everything looks as it should. The stages and backgrounds look great, and while the gameplay is running, the fighters look just as awesome. I really wish that Sega had given the developers a bit more time to add more content above and beyond the arcade, but I was still happy with this overall. I imported it with my Japanese Dreamcast at that November 1998 launch, and I still have that very copy all these years later.
Fight 2, ready, go!
Like many of the selections in this episode, Tennis 2K2 was originally a Naomi-based arcade title, ported to the Dreamcast later that year in 2001. It has real male and female players, singles and doubles matchups, and supports 4 players at once. It has a create-a-player, incredible graphics, and a world tour mode where you can build a home, gear up, rest, and enter various tournaments from around the world. The gameplay has an easy pick up and play element that allows anyone to enjoy it, but don't let that simplicity make you think there's nothing deeper here to master. This gameplay is among the best a tennis game has ever offered, and once you get good, even newer titles feel tame in comparison. It was ported elsewhere, but the Dreamcast is where I like to play it the most.
Love. 15 all.
Our last game came from the Naomi arcade board originally, and the Dreamcast port was just as fun. Zombie Revenge was a blast whether alone or with a friend, basically a cross between a beat 'em up and a shooter. That's because it's a side story to the House of the Dead, and even has you returning to the first game's location as part of your adventure. This one has so many moves to master. There's guns, hand-to-hand combat, charge attacks, throws, combos, guard counters, rolls, recoveries, and of course, huge bosses to defeat. It can be a little awkward at first because the gameplay has an element of finesse in how you attack your enemies, especially with moves like the variable shot where you must wait for the perfect moment to damage your foe. But this still is a wild ride start to finish. And speaking of, it's not easy, so finishing it will take you a few tries until you learn your adversaries. It has the same great appeal as the Dynamite Cop series, with the added bonus of everything that made the House of the Dead so memorable. I hope you guys enjoyed my episode of easy pick up and play Dreamcast games to celebrate the 25th anniversary of the North American launch. This hardware was so special during its retail run. It had the best console visuals you could get at the time, a bunch of arcade-perfect ports, and it was the last time Sega would make a console for its legions of fans. While I will always appreciate the original releases we went over here, you may also want to check out the recently announced Capcom Fighting Collection 2 for modern consoles. Not only does it have the Capcom vs SNK games, but it also includes both Power Stone releases, Project Justice, and much more. If you don't own a Dreamcast, this looks like a great way to get these classics in one place for a reasonable price. It really is hard to believe the Dreamcast was that long ago, but it's a testament to its legacy that so many of these games hold up so well today. The legend will never die. I'm Sega Lord X. Thank you guys for watching, and I will catch you next time.